Hello, good afternoon. Thanks for joining. There are three of you. I don't know if other people will join. I have to apologize because I apparently with the first invitation I had 2 a.m. instead of 2 p.m. So I really need to take responsibility. Anyway, the session is being recorded, so I will make it available. And seeing that it's just a small group, I would think we can make it a bit more intimate and interactive. So it's not intended to be a very long session. I'm going to share my screen and go through a PowerPoint. Hopefully, this will help to clarify matters. And there are now 4 attendees, half are Coscap staff. Thank God for Coscap staff. Anyway, music on YouTube. So I'm going to start by giving a general or broader perspective, and then we'll focus more specifically on YouTube. So when you want to use music online, whether it's say for a streaming service or a webcasting service, or even just on your website, there are two sets of rights you have to clear. Um, and even in the traditional non-digital environment, you generally need to consider the two groups or two categories of rights. And if you think of Coscap's membership, our membership reflects these two categories of rights. So first of all, you always have to consider the rights in the underlying musical works, the rights in the songs. And these are the rights of composers, authors, and publishers. And these rights are generally communication to the public, which can include what you would know as the public performance right. So the playing of the music in public or the transmission, say, by cable or satellite. And the reproduction rate, which you would probably more refer to as the mechanical rate. And this comes up when you, for example, say a radio station for its music library will make copies of the recordings, and the recordings contain the underlying musical works or songs. So generally, there are two rights managed by the Collective Management Organization, or the CMO, on behalf of the composers, authors, and publishers. The performing rights side, which is communication to the public or which includes public performance, and the reproduction or mechanical right. So as you see in the diagram, you would go to the CMO to license those rights. Then you have rights in the sound recording. And a sound recording embeds the musical word, the sound, but there are separate and distinct rights in the recording of the work. And the owner of the recording, the owner of the master recordings, which are often also record companies, they have rights in that recording. And in the digital environment, there's a new right. Well, I say new, but in fact, since about 1995, 96, this right called the making available right. So if you consider in the traditional environment, offline. Coscap manages the rights of the owners of master recordings in specific areas, and one of those would be public performance. But we do not generally administer the reproduction rights. So if somebody wants to copy your recording, that's not something Coscap would generally administer, but we do once the rights owner authorizes us to do so. So if you are a broadcaster, you will need to have a license to cover the rights in the underlying musical work, the copyright side. And you will also need to have an agreement to pay for the use of the song recordings. Now, if you consider in the digital environment, when you stream music, what are you doing? You are streaming a recording of a musical work. So in terms of the musical work, you're communicating that to the public. And that communication to the public was defined in 1995. There was an international treaty which looked at what was happening in the digital environment and sought to define the different actions. So when you stream a piece of music, you're making the musical work, you're communicating the musical work to the public. But that musical work is embedded in a song recording. So communication to the public, is that distribution? Are you distributing the music? Are you doing a public performance? What exactly is it? And they decided that when you speak of distribution, you're talking about distribution of physical copies. But in the online environment, they came up with these new terms. And it actually became very convoluted and complicated. So the owners of song recordings have what is known as a making available right. So they have an exclusive right to authorize the making available to the public of their song recording. And the making available right is a part of the communication to the public right. And it's important because in the traditional environment, you have a right called public performance. Both the owners of the copyright, the writers, authors, publishers, as well as the owners of the song recording. You should be familiar with the concept of public performance. And why is that important? Because if you are playing the music privately, you don't need a license. So you have to have some understanding of what is public. And when you go to the online environment, if you think about it, I sit here, I stream music individually, it's just me, there's no one else here. But 10,000 people in Barbados could be doing that right now. They could be streaming the same service and listening to the same service I'm listening to, but each individually. So is that public? So understanding that the concept of public in the digital environment was a different concept meant that they had to come up with new terminologies. So just to be clear, you need to clear the underlying musical works, and that's done generally via the collective management organizations such as Coscap. And you need to clear the rights in song recordings, specifically the making available right. But the difference here is that this right is managed directly by the record companies. So, in the traditional environment, this graphic illustrates how things would work. So you have your local market, Barbados, and you have generally a local CMO with local members, and that CMO would benefit from a series of reciprocal agreements with similar organizations around the world, where they would grant the rights they manage to the local organization so that it could manage their rights in the territory. So one of these reciprocals could be with Coscap. So Coscap would grant a license to Coscap to manage its rights, its members' rights in Barbados on its behalf, and Coscap would do the same. And traditionally, these reciprocals would cover performing rights with those societies which manage those rights, and the reproduction or mechanical rights. Now, Coscap manages both, but often you will find that there are organizations which only manage one of these rights. The point being that the local CMO would have a reciprocal agreement to cover these various rights. Now, I showed you, this was the graphic here, and it's the symbol here is the tearing apart, and that's what actually happened in the online environment. Things were torn apart and changed. So to make a fairly long story as succinct as possible, what happened? And this really started in Europe, in the EU. So the EU was concerned with the growth of the online environment and the need to have licenses to cover multiple territories, because you had streaming services say developing, and of course the streaming service isn't going to say, oh, I only, or it's very unlikely to say, I only want to stream in Germany. No, they're looking to have regional licenses. They want to be able to stream throughout Europe. And what was happening is that they were then required to have licenses from each European territory to cover the communication to the public right and the mechanical rights. On the one hand, this is for the making available right. And you can imagine how convoluted and challenging that became. So the EU decided that they would change the system for the online environment. And one of those changes, mind you, they stepped back eventually, but it was too late. But what they agreed was that the big American publishers, the big Anglo, meaning English, and American publishers would no longer have to have their rights managed those publishers, but in practice, it could only affect those publishers because of differences in the way we do business. So in Barbados, when you join Coscap, you do so as a writer with an assignment, which means you transfer your rights in full, completely to Coscap, and that's a very European approach. The English publishers and the American generally, because of their anti-competition laws, operate a little differently, and they operate under usually under agency agreements, which means that they don't they have the ability to pull back their rights much easier than other rights holders. So when the EU said, well, you don't have to go through a CMO to manage your rights, what happened was that the big Anglo-American publishers decided, okay, we think we could do a better job, so we're going to manage our online mechanical rights ourselves. Not the communication to the public right, only the online mechanical rights. So, and then they went into discussions with some of the big CMOs, and they set up these special companies to manage those rights and to issue licenses on their behalf, and on top of that, to process data. So it completely disrupted the market. So you had a situation where, let's say Sony in Germany would have been a member of GEMA, the CMO in Germany, having both its communication to the public and mechanical rights managed by GEMA. Following the decision of the European Commission, Sony says, you know what, fine. GEMA can continue to manage the communication to the public, right? But we are going to set up our own company to manage all of our online mechanicals throughout Europe. And we're going to do that with the French Society. And so it meant that if you wanted to use Sony's repertoire, so you set up a streaming service, you want to use music that's owned by Sony Publishing, you would have to, and you're in Germany, so you would go to GEMA, the German Society. GEMA would say, fine, I can give you a license for part of the rights, the communication to the public, for Sony's repertoire. And I can then give you a license as well to cover all the other communication to the public rights we still manage, which would include from other societies, etc. And we can give you mechanical rights licenses, but not for Sony. So you would have to go to GEMA for some of the rights, but then you would have to go to the company that Sony established with the French Society to get a license to cover the online mechanical rights. And then you still needed to have a clearance for the sound recordings, because remember, those are separate rights. Those are not managed through the society. So you then still need to go to the record companies to get licenses for their catalogs. Now, if you are a big service provider like YouTube, the record companies would have negotiated a global license with YouTube for their repertoire. If you are a smaller entity, then you need to go to the record company and try to negotiate a license. So I hope you understand what happened, but if you don't, you can let me know. But those were the main changes. So it started out in Europe, but the effect has been felt across the world. And when you look at the Caribbean, it has especially had a big impact here with this withdrawal of rights, because it started with the publishers. And as I told you, the publishers, some of them set up these companies with some of the big CMOs. And then some of the CMOs decided, you know what, we're going to change how we function in the online environment. So just as, say, Sony record company or Sony Publishing may say we're going to start issuing licenses on a global basis and so on, which means we don't want the CMOs managing any of these rights, not only in Europe, but throughout the world. Some of the CMOs said, you know what? We don't want some of our online rights managed through reciprocal licenses. We want to manage them directly. So as you can imagine, this just broke up everything. Whereas before, it was very simple. Now you had all these different parts to deal with. So this is what happened. So you still have your local CMO, and it will still have reciprocals, but there has been movement. Those reciprocals are not like before, because you have some of the big CMOs pull out of those reciprocals only for online. You have some of the big publishers have also pulled out. So in both those cases, you need to go to them directly. And of course, you always in the online environment have to go to the record companies. So it went from needing a license from your local organization to needing a license from your local organization, plus from some of the international CMOs, plus from the record companies and the major publishers. So in effect, licensing became a lot more complicated. So in terms of the Caribbean, the societies in the Caribbean, the English-speaking Caribbean, have an association called the Association of Caribbean Copyright Societies, ACCES. And ACCES, we determined that for online licensing, we would establish a pan-regional licensing system in the Caribbean. Because our position is, even if someone comes and says, I want to do a streaming service for Barbados, chances are it's going to be going out to the entire Caribbean. And we didn't think it was worthwhile to really continue to think of the Caribbean, the English-speaking Caribbean, as a number of very small territories, but that we would facilitate licensing on a regional level. And in fact, this is what the big service providers demand. So when we speak with Apple or Facebook or YouTube, they are saying, look, we aren't going to go to, 5 little societies and go through these negotiations. We need a license for the entire Caribbean. And the thing is, they want a license that will cover all the rights to make it as simple as possible, because they, aren't going to go through the hassle of going to different people. That is other than the record companies. For the record companies, the standard is you go to the record companies. So the ACCES societies are all members of, internationally, we're grouped with Latin America. So we work very closely with the Latin American societies, and they set up, I'm sorry, I can't spell very well, but they set up something called Latino Tour. And this was established as a one-stop shop for digital licensing. So for the entire Latin American territory, it's possible to get a license to cover the entire Latin America. And this allows them for the, I really can't spell, there you go, sorry. But this allowed for negotiation strength, because as you would know, YouTube is really Google, and negotiating with some of these big companies, you need to have some strength. So there's strength in numbers, and also it is a way of providing good service, because again, YouTube isn't interested in going to all of these different societies and having to negotiate. So it's a convenience. And then, so they negotiate as a group, they issue a single Latin auteur license. And then because the amount of data to be processed, because billions and billions of streams are happening online, and even the largest CMOs are unable to do all of that analysis internally. So generally, they set up these hubs and outsource that processing. For the Latin autor system, there's a company in Argentina that does that processing on behalf of all the Latin autor members. So we joined the Latin autor system and we were very, very pleased, but it hasn't really worked out yet. So the Latin American societies have done very well with this system. They've been able to issue a number of licenses to all the big digital service providers and really seen their revenue grow. The problem is in the Caribbean. We are now struggling to kick off, and soon, very soon, we hope to have some good news in that regard, but it's been a long struggle. Why? Because in Latin auteur, on behalf of the writers, publishers, and composers, they can issue one license, or at the very worst, two licenses, because there's a special arrangement with the publishers. But it's a very streamlined process. The most difficult part is negotiation. In the Caribbean, we have that picture that I showed you, where you still need to have multiple licenses. It's not streamlined at all. And that's because of our history. So our legal system and our legal tradition is very much based on the UK. Whilst in Latin America, theirs is based on civil law and what happens, say, in Spain and France and so on. So in our system, in the English-speaking islands, anybody, any entity can set up and start issuing licenses, copyright licenses, any rights holder really. It's an open market, free for all. So once those changes started happening in Europe, it didn't take them long to realize, oh, in the Caribbean, this is possible. We can also go and we can withdraw and license directly in the Caribbean. In Latin America, they can't. To issue licenses, so for the publishers to say, or for the other CMOs to say, you know what, we don't want to work with SADAIC. SADAIC is a society in Argentina. We will license directly. So people, any entities wanting to use our music in Argentina will need to come to us directly. No, in those countries, the regulations say only the approved local body can issue licenses. So you cannot withdraw and do it yourself. You have to go through the CMO. So the CMOs are in a very strong position. So all this thing about breaking up the market and so on can't happen. In our territories, it very much can. So whilst the big digital service providers have been able to go and get a license and cover all of Latin America easily, when they look at the Caribbean, which is very small and really, for them not that valuable, they see a bit of a mess. And they've been avoiding that mess. And for this reason, YouTube is not licensed in the Caribbean as yet. Neither is Facebook. In the case of Apple Music, Apple actually, with iTunes, had a deal with us many years ago, but that has not yet been renewed. Spotify is not licensed as yet either. And it's for this reason. It's because it's too complicated for them. They say it's too complicated. So we've had to work to convince them, look, um, it's a little complicated, but we still manage a lot of the rights. We still have all of the American music rights, which are major. And, it is still going to be worth your while. And basically try to figure out a way to make it as simple as possible to encourage them to set up in the region. So people in the region who are earning from YouTube, they will, if they're paid any royalties via Coscap, they're going to be extremely low because this is just from the little random performances picked up, say in the UK or in other territories with which we have reciprocals. And if you don't have your performances attached to a monetization strategy, then the royalties are going to be very, very low. It's just, if you get a few thousand plays, you might be able to generate a few cents. I think the last I checked, the value per play was 0.0001 cent, or it may be another zero. But the point is to generate meaningful earnings, just so there's no commercialization, nothing. There's just your music is on YouTube and it's being played. The earnings will be extremely low. You're not going to generate any from the Caribbean itself for the reasons I just explained. So when members say, oh, my music is on YouTube, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but A, YouTube is not licensed in the Caribbean. B, okay, you get performances outside of the Caribbean, but because it's just performances and they aren't attached to a strategy to really generate and commercialize it, the earnings will be very, very low. Now, once YouTube is licensed in the Caribbean, and it will be, I can't tell you when, but it's being worked on. There is a greater opportunity to monetize your presence there. YouTube offers advertising. So you have to, and I'm not going into the intricacies because whilst I can offer some guidance, it's really for you, it's your business. You need to do your research and so on, but you need to at least consider setting up a channel. You have to have the repertoire, the videos to show. Once you have enough content, you set up your channel. And to enter their advertising program, you need to have logged at least 4,000 watched hours and have at least 1,000 subscribers. So those are the benchmarks you need to bear in mind. And then you can have ads running on your channel. They can place ads for you. What you need to pay attention to is their advertising guidelines. So they have guidelines and standards concerning sexual and explicit content. So this is something I don't really get with when I see members putting up highly explicit, over the top, X-rated content, I realized, well, obviously they have no plans to work towards getting ads because, if you're aware of the advertising guidelines, you would understand that you need to be careful with the video content. You can also then look to generate revenue by having people pay subscriptions for your channel. What does that mean in real terms? It means that you have to have the fan base and you have to have commercially attractive content. You can also make money from the sale of merchandise through your channel. They have what they call super chat and super stickers, sorry. Super chat, I believe, is where your people, your followers, when they do messages, the messages are highlighted, given prominence, and stickers work in a similar way to offer prominence to messages and so on from your fans. And then, there's YouTube Premium, which is their paid service, where then you generate, once your content is being performed on their paid service, you can also generate revenue in that way. So when I get the question, as I said before, my music, I get tens of thousands of people listening to my music on YouTube, etc. It really doesn't mean much. Unless there's a monetization strategy, you would need to get millions of views. And then once you do, or once YouTube has a license for the territory, which would then allow you access to the monetization opportunities, then you have to be careful that you have content that meets their guidelines so that you can attract advertising, because chances are that's really how you're going to be looking to generate revenues, through the advertising. Now, beyond that, what I didn't discuss, but I will touch on briefly, is where the other side, where people want to have or streamline events on YouTube, and will ask us about licensing. And when I say YouTube, the same would apply for Facebook and Instagram. And they ask us for a license. So let's say you're a DJ and you're having an event on YouTube. Remember what I showed you before. Here. So there are two levels of rights to be clear. You have those that are managed by the collective management organization that you can get from us. Oh, what am I doing? Right? And then you still, so when you're using these song recordings, what I will tell potential licensees is you still will need to have a license from the owners of the masters. If you're going to use local recordings, we can try to help you. But when you're using international music, I can't, because there's no collective system. You have to go to the record companies, and on their websites and so on, they will try to facilitate easy licensing, but you need to go through that process. So then here, so you have the record companies, but then you have some of the major publishers who have withdrawn. So even though we can issue some rights, I can't issue all rights in that regard. And there are few CMOs, not many, but there are few for their rights you also have to go to them directly. So when you ask Coscap, oh, I want to have an event on YouTube, I need a license. Unless it's local, maybe regional music, we tell you we can't. We can give you for some of the repertoire we still manage, but the fact is that all rights won't be cleared, and I can't guarantee you the event wouldn't end up being blocked. So I don't issue the license. So, excuse me, that is the situation as far as YouTube is concerned. And it's generally the same if you're even talking, as I said, Facebook or Instagram. I will notate some questions if there are any, or if there's anything you need me to explain further. Go ahead, Randy. You had a
Hey,
question?
yes, please. Good afternoon to everybody. You mentioned the monetization process for YouTube. You know personally that's a big thing for me, and the availability of it here in the Caribbean. Funny enough, there's a way that you can monetize. I went on watched some tutorials and stuff, and you can change the region to UK or US, and then click the monetization option. When I did that, the thing came up with the analysis. So for my channel, I have the correct number of subscribers, but under the 4,000 watch hours. So just so that people know they can actually access that option. I'm hoping, I assume that it's because I had spent some time in the UK, and I think I have my channel registered at that address at the time. So I don't know if that's the reason why I was able to change the location, but it's something to look into from I think any other person who may be on the webinar listening in.
You may be able to do it. I didn't check. Maybe using a VPN as well.
Yeah.
That may allow you to
Yeah.
get around that. But as I told you, we're working really hard to change the current situation. And with any luck, we'll have some news by the end of this month.
Yeah, that'll
Not
be
that's not necessarily YouTube though,
yeah.
but the point is, making some forward as far as online licenses are concerned.
But the other thing that I discovered too is because of, like in my case as a studio putting up songs, I mean the catalog is pretty extensive on YouTube. However, still didn't meet the 4,000 watch hours. So based on how the platform of YouTube is structured, it is not necessarily geared to you putting up um, the videos, short videos, because on the average a person may only watch 30 seconds to a minute and 30 of any video that you may put up. So longer blogs and video content is what will get you up to those 4,000 watch hours. So that's just something else to consider in terms of how your YouTube channel is structured. So you
What
can actually,
what about the actual content itself? Because I'm concerned that what seems to happen here is that people seem to like having really outrageous sexual content.
oh yeah.
And I'm like I said, I don't think they have a monetization strategy.
Right.
I was wondering if you saw that as a potential challenge as well.
I I'm not sure, because I guess on the international market there is some content that has that same heavy sexual innuendo, and they still have the ads running on it, because I guess because of the celebrity prowess that's attached to their channel. So in a sense, it's about building that reputation and repertoire. But I get what you're saying, because there are some from our end that really shouldn't really be out there. But when you look at the international market, they're doing it, but they're doing it at a different level. So maybe we're trying to emulate that, or have as close to as possible a similar type image in terms of that type of explicit content.
Okay, thank you, Randy. Any other questions or comments? Patrick, Esther, I see you're there and you're unusually quiet. But any other questions or comments? Okay. Well, I don't know. I hope it was clear. Otherwise, you can always just send me an email, Erica, ERICA at Coscap, COSCAP.org, and I'll respond to your queries.
One, yeah, someone was asking about the recording and how would you make it available? Because some people are messaging me and said they would like to see it, but they were in other meetings that they couldn't get on here.
Yes. Once I get the recording from Zoom, I'll post it on our Facebook page and I'll have it posted on our website and YouTube as well. So once I get the recording, I'll send it out to be posted. So they'll see it online. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll assume that's it. Thank you all for joining. And I hope it was useful. Like I said, you can always reach out to me directly with any other questions. And I hope in a few weeks to have some really good news. But I can tell you that we're trying really hard to, make things happen. Other than that, stay safe and take care. Bye-bye.